Let me tell you what the Pricolici is. Not only our people, but many others across the world believe that certain individuals can transform into harmful animals. But there's great confusion with this belief. Some say only sorcerers can become wolves or dogs or other beasts. But even on this they disagree. For some claim sorcerers are turned into animals by God's punishment for their wicked deeds, and thus they roam the night. While others say they change into fierce animals of their own free will to wreak havoc. Then there are those who say sorcerers do not change whenever they please, but only when their cursed time comes, that is, their sickness, which is much like the way birds molt, snakes shed their skins, or deer cast off their antlers. Yet still others say that sorcerers themselves do not change into animals, but rather that it is they, through their magic, who turn other people into beasts. So wrote Romanian poet George Coșbuc in an article from 1905, expressing his confusion about werewolf beliefs, confusion that many have struggled to make sense of. My name is Radiana, and I hope to bring clarity to the confusion by looking at the nature, origins, and accounts of werewolves from Romanian tradition and beyond. So settle in and let me tell you the story. The werewolf is but one variant among a broader group of shapeshifters with dual identities, including figures like the Mora, Strigoi, witches, fairies, and weather magicians. Collectively referred to as double beings or two-souled beings, their names and forms vary across cultures, and they all embody different aspects of the otherworld. Weather magicians inhabit the furthest otherworld of the ether and clouds, where they commune with sky gods, storm demons, and dragons for good harvest and divine justice. The Mora, Strigoi, and witches inhabit the night-bound otherworld, closest to the human environment, where their alter egos and familiar spirits tend to be domestic animals like cats, chickens, even frogs and lizards. Werewolves inhabit the other world of the wilderness, where their alter egos and spirit guardians often take the forms of wolves, dogs, boars, and bears. Despite their differences, all double beings share common demonic traits, often apparent from birth. These traits are considered marks of the sacred and symbolize their connection to the other world. The otherworld is a realm of primal chaos and untamed forces, a reflection of the more primitive aspects of earthly nature. It is ruled by supernatural beings, the dead, and, in many traditions, a primordial twin whose sacrifice enabled creation. In Romanian mythology, that figure is the demiurge devil, a primordial being and twin brother of God. Though a co-creator of the world, he personifies chaos, a force that relentlessly strives for supremacy, seeking to pull the world back into its primal state. He is associated with reversal practices and incomplete inventions, reflecting the primitive nature of the otherworld and the regression from cosmos to chaos and from culture to nature. Among the devil's creations is the wolf, which he shaped from clay but could not bring to life. God breathed life into the wolf instead and commanded it to bite its creator. From that moment, the wolf has been fated to pursue the devil, and folklore holds that every wolf and dog bears 3 of the devil's hairs in its fur. Another of the devil's creations was the first werewolf, or more accurately, the first werebear. In the myth of the creation of the world, the devil taught the first man to wear his pelt inside out and growl like a beast. He then instructed the man to hide under a bridge to frighten God as he passed. Upon seeing the man, God cursed him to remain that way forever, thus creating the first bear. The wolf, bear, and werewolf thus embody a dual nature, both demonic and sacred, as creations of both the devil and God, of both nature and culture. Notably, the demonic is a supernatural force and manifestation of the sacred. It is not synonymous with the diabolical. The demonic only becomes diabolical when its power is used for evil. In Europe, local terminology for double beings often overlaps, with pure types of these figures existing only in works of fiction. This ambiguity was further emphasized by cross-cultural publications and clerical writings from the 17th to 19th centuries, which treated them as manifestations of a single supernatural phenomenon caused by diabolical witchcraft or illusion. From the 17th century onward, the term werewolf became primarily associated with Selenian werewolves, cursed individuals whose transformations and aggression were believed to be influenced by the phases of the moon. However, in Central and Southeastern European beliefs, all individuals who possess a demonic alter ego in animal form, whether from birth or through magic, are considered werewolves. The terminology for werewolves across the Balkans largely originates from the Proto-Slavic Vukodlak, meaning wolf's hide. However, regional variants like the Greek vrikolakas and Romanian Vrkolak often refer to the demonic alter ego or spirit of the werewolf. In Romanian tradition, especially among the Hungarian and Romanian communities of Transylvania, the preferred terms for werewolf are Pricolici, or in case it only has 3 legs, Pricolici. Pricolici is also synonymous with other terms widely used in rural areas, such as Strigoi the Lup, meaning wolf witch, or Lupar, meaning master of wolves or wolfman. In archaic thinking, the alter ego of the werewolf is the second soul, which has a demonic nature. That is why it is often said that a Pricolici or Vrkolak is a demon or spirit that inhabits a person's soul. Magicians in many traditions are believed to have souls that can move outside the body. Whilst one soul is attached to the body, giving it life, the other is detachable and capable of assuming an animal form, which it may keep long after the magician's death. The second soul may serve as a companion or guardian or a destiny soul. This belief appears as the outer soul motif in over 85 traditions from North Africa, the Mediterranean, Eastern Europe, Scandinavia, and Central Asia. In European cultures especially, it serves as a fundamental principle for communication with the spirit world, originating from primitive shamanism, where the soul of the shaman, capable of spiritual flight, would ascend to the other world to commune with spirits and the ancestors. In Romanian folklore, the werewolves called Vrkolaci are demonic spirits of the dead and the air that may appear as flying animals, often wolves or dogs, and sometimes snakes or dragons. They can be created from the souls of unbaptized children, much like storm demons, or the souls of dead werewolves. They may also arise from the souls of individuals who took their own lives, or from those whose deaths were slow and agonizing or caused by animals. They can also be conjured from thin air as manifestations of curses or transgressions, such as breaking taboos related to spinning. Vrkolaci are said to appear on Tuesdays at midnight, when women use that demonic time to spin yarn without a candle and cast spells with the spun threads. They cling to them, absorbing their magic, and climb to the moon, tearing it apart with their teeth. Thus the moon may appear bloody sometimes. At other times, they eat so much of it that only a thin sliver remains. They become too heavy then, and the thread upon which they rest snaps. As they fall, losing their powers, the moon regains hers, restoring her purity and original form. Although Vrkolaci are predominantly demonic spirits of the air and the dead, they can also be the alter egos of living Selenian werewolves, who are often cursed, having acquired the condition by taking the life of a sibling or through diabolical magic. They are described as lethargic, cataleptic, or sleeping people, whose souls ascend to the sun or the moon to devour it. They are also referred to as those in the winds, much like fairy witches and weather magicians, whose ecstatic flight likewise originates from primitive shamanism. It is said that when the soul of the Vukodlak feels like taking a bite of the moon, the person who possesses such a soul first feels drowsy, followed by an overwhelming urge to sleep, as if he hasn't slept for an entire week. His soul then flies to the moon, leaving him as though dead. If you disturb the sleeping Vukodlak, he will remain asleep forever, as his soul, upon returning from its long journey, can no longer find the same mouth through which it left to re-enter the body. The Vukodlak may appear dead for a night or a day, during which their spirit also tricks or assaults others, often taking the form of a dog which people are afraid of as of the devil. Discarding this form thereafter, the spirit returns to the body and the man resurrects. People in the past interpreted the lunar cycle and eclipses as the werewolves' attempts to bring about eternal darkness, to return the cosmos to primordial chaos where they could rule. Following a solar eclipse on August 18, 1793, an eyewitness from Banat remarked in shock that Vukodlaci ate the sun. 4 years later, during another eclipse on November 23, 1797, a frightened eyewitness described the event as a sign that werewolves devour the moon. And so, to help the moon and prevent the eternal night, Romanians performed a rather loud form of banishment. In winter, they created an uproar to scare away the werewolves by clanging metal rods, firing rifles, ringing church bells, and playing loud music. The belief that aerial double beings consume or steal the luminaries is common in southeastern Europe. In Russian and Ukrainian beliefs, witches steal celestial bodies and conceal them within their homes. During their Sabbath flight, they sweep the stars and moon from the sky, leaving behind a trail of asteroid showers. In Bulgarian beliefs, witches steal the moon from the sky to transform it into a cow and use its milk and butter for powerful charms. And women bound by a covenant with the devil are said to perform rituals in complete nudity on specific nights to gradually shrink the moon and hide it away in a jar. Similar beliefs appear in South America, where luminaries are eaten during eclipses by one or more celestial jaguars, and in South Asia, where monsters swallow the luminaries or abduct them from the sky and hold them captive in a fortress. Unlike the Selenian Vukodlaci, the Pricolici are earthbound living werewolves of a high status within the supernatural hierarchy. They have control over the animal world, which they command through their demonic nature, so much so that they are sometimes referred to as Vâlva lupilor or Vâlva câinilor, meaning chief spirit or spirit guardian of wolves and dogs. The Pricolici can transform at will into large dogs, wolves, or bears, often joining wild packs and leading them in attacks on cattle. It is said that a wolf pack led by a Pricolici is the fiercest and cannot be caught or stopped. Similar to Strigoi witches, they vampirize cows and sheep, and like Mora witches, they are skilled at creeping into homes to sit on the chests of sleeping individuals. They can be born with their powers or acquire them magically by drinking after wolves, which points to a shamanic initiation ritual. It is said that most are Pricolici by their own knowledge, meaning they are sorcerers who turn into a specific animal by flipping themselves over as they choose, either to frighten someone or to do certain misdeeds, like drying up wells, stealing the animal's vitality, scaring children, and other things. They are either cursed or fated to turn into wolves, with whom they roam in a pack until the curse is lifted, after which they return to their human form. However, there are also some who, without knowing it, transform into animals during sleep. These are unwilling Pricolici, cursed by sorcerers, sold to the devil as children, or born from an unwed mother in the 3rd generation. In a Romanian folktale, the Pricolici is the 7th child of a 7th generation born out of wedlock. Or, in another variant, the man becomes a Pricolici in the 7th year of his marriage. However, the story goes the same. A man and his wife went to gather hay. At one point, the man told his wife to wait while he ventured into the forest, cautioning her not to fear anything she might see. While waiting, the woman was attacked by a black dog that tore at her clothes. She defended herself as best she could, using only a stick until it broke. After the dog finally fled, the man returned from the forest. When the woman recounted what had happened, he laughed, but as he did, she noticed a scrap of her torn dress caught between his teeth. Horrified, she realized her husband was a Pricolici and immediately left him. Variants of this story also appear in Central and Northern European folklore, where the werewolf tears at a woman's red petticoat. And whilst those stories warn against what used to be considered indecent relationships, the Romanian one warns against the predisposition of the Pricolici for mischief or trickery. Countless other tales illustrate this, where the Pricolici transforms into a wolf to scorn his enemies and attack their cattle. While they can often transform at will, they may also transform spontaneously if triggered by episodes of madness, seasonal cycles, or the sighting of a wolf, dog, or other animals corresponding to their demonic alter ego. During such episodes, they may go on a rampage, indiscriminately attacking those in their path, including their own family. However, most stories emphasize that Pricolici generally avoid contact with humans and rarely attack them. Many are said to live out their fated transformations without causing harm. Rather than being depicted as monsters, they are often portrayed as patrons or leaders of wolves and dogs. To transform, Pricolici retreat to a secluded place, hidden from the sight of others, where they remove their clothes and roll over their heads 3 times, changing their appearance into a large wolf or dog, often with a limp or missing limb. Like the Pricolici, witches who turn into cats or dogs perform the ritual alone and naked. Weather magicians and snakes likewise avoid human sight for 7 years to turn into dragons. Pricolici regain their human form after a period of time ranging from days to years. They may revert to human form if someone throws them a piece of bread. In the Apuseni Mountains, some Pricolici are believed to be cursed to their animal form for a certain number of years until someone shows them kindness. One legend tells of a wolf that often appeared among the villagers, who would kindly feed it with polenta. Later, when the werewolf resumed his human form, he repaid their kindness with valuable gifts and counsel. Werewolves also return to human form upon sustaining a wound that draws blood. This is a common motif in European folklore, where the phrase "strike but do not cut" from witches' sabbats suggests that cutting would cause bleeding, thereby ending the demonic state. Werewolf magicians like the Pricolici are marked by the sacred or cursed and thus possess a demonic power that compels them at certain sacred times to transform into their primitive form. Some may be separated from their consciousness in animal form, whilst others may be very much aware. The transformation can be involuntary and spontaneous, or voluntary and initiated through ritual acts. It may be reversible, lasting for days, months, or years, or it may even be permanent. Werewolf magicians are said to transform into animals by donning animal skins, commonly wolf or bear hides, known as wolf shirts. In Central and Western Europe, these are often substituted with leather belts. This ritual originates from the ancient belief that wearing a mask or costume transforms not only the appearance but also the soul into the creature it represents. A vivid example of this appears in the records of a Hungarian werewolf trial from 1754, where a szokalos farkas, or bearded wolf, claimed, "Yes, I am half man and half wolf, and I have a belt at Pence, at Ferenc Holdos's place, which works so that if I tie it around me, I am instantly transformed. In Romanian folklore, the transformation into a werewolf is achieved uniquely through a somersault, which represents a symbolic reversal, the death of the man and the rebirth as an animal. This is reflected in the Romanian-Hungarian term Pricolici, which translates to skin turned inside out. Similarly, the wolf shirt functions as a second skin, akin to a caul, also traditionally referred to as a shirt, that werewolves and other double beings are often born with. In Russian folklore, werewolf magicians typically transform into animals during the new moon by jumping over 12 knives laid blade up, while reciting a series of magical words. To return to their human form, they must repeat the process in reverse from the other side. However, if someone finds the knives and removes them from the ground while the magicians are away in their animal forms, they will remain trapped forever. The existence of werewolves is marked by cyclic patterns of death and rebirth. Their initiations and metamorphoses typically occur during specific wolf times, often around the winter solstice, and are aligned with lunar cycles and the numerological significance of 3 and 7. Children born around wolf times are said to vanish into the forest at the age of 12 and live as wolves for 7 years. Cursed werewolves are also believed to be trapped in animal form for 7 years. In Russian folklore, the curse ends after 7 years only if the sorcerer who cast it is still alive. Otherwise, the werewolf remains cursed forever. Werewolf magicians can return to their human form through the reversal of their primitive nature. This often involves symbolic gestures that connect the wild beast to their more civilized human ego. A prevalent motif in European folklore is offering the werewolf, who typically devours raw meat, a piece of bread or other cooked or baked foods, like in the case of the Pricolici. Another motif is dressing the werewolf in human clothing. Just as donning a wolf shirt transforms them into an animal, putting on human garments restores their humanity. This belief is reflected in European werewolf legends from the Middle Ages, where the werewolf removes its clothes to transform into a wolf, but it cannot revert to human form if the clothes are stolen. Due to their metamorphosis and demonic nature, werewolves are often condemned to a life of isolation and exclusion. Their destinies are marked at birth by symbols that suggest an existence outside conventional time. These include illegitimate births and physical traits reflective of their demonic nature, such as a tooth, tail, or bristle-like hair. Being born feet first likewise symbolizes a reversal of nature and an otherworldly origin. Even corrupted or imposed fates, such as curses, excommunication, or exile, separate them from societal norms. In German, Slavic, Romanian, and occasionally Hungarian traditions, one of the most notable birth traits is the caul. Not only does it suggest a destined transformation, but it also signifies magical abilities that extend beyond werewolf lore. The caul is seen as the seat of the alter ego and symbol of the animal's soul, the second skin that helps the magician transform into the animal, as reflected in terms like shirt, frock, or bonnet across different European languages. It is the natural counterpart to the woven shirt that initiates the werewolf into culture and reverts them to human form. In Romanian tradition, midwives interpret the destiny revealed in a baby's caul, declaring what the fate spinners have ordained in the mother's womb. This is consistent with other European beliefs suggesting that a werewolf's destiny is determined by the fates. Likewise, it explains the recurrence of the number 7. The number originally drew its magical significance from the 7 planetary heavens, which, like the fates, are believed to influence the Earth as well as individual destinies as they move through the zodiac. That is why, in Romanian folklore, the fate spinners are also called the zodiacs. In many European beliefs, magical children are destined to leave their homes at the age of 7. In Hungarian folklore, children born with teeth are said to depart when they turn 7 to become taltos, even if they are chained. Meanwhile, children destined to be Pricolici are said to transform regularly after the age of 7. In Romanian folklore, children at the age of 7 are taken by supernatural beings to become weather magicians and fairy witches, whilst others are fated to be taken by the winds and die. Werewolves specifically are called or taken by other wolves or the lord of animals into the wilderness, where they undergo 7 or more cycles of death and rebirth. In werewolf legends from the Balkans and the Alps, the initiation is a death and rebirth ritual similar to that of Eurasian shamans, whereby wolves dismantle the initiate's body, taking apart their bones and then reassembling them to revive them as a werewolf. This often results in a missing bone, causing the werewolf to limp or have only 3 legs. Likewise, witches across the Balkans are often depicted limping or missing a leg, and figures like the Hungarian taltos are said to crush the arms and legs of initiates. Feeling compelled to go or being taken away by the lord of animals marks the beginning of transformation and transition into a natural realm that, in the eyes of the human community, symbolizes death. This is reflected in many European languages, where terms for being taken away, dying, and turning into a wolf are synonymous. A Romanian tale illustrates this, describing a child fated by the midwives to be a Pricolici, who grows wolf-like hair, develops an animal-like stench, and ultimately dies. To avert the werewolf's fate, midwives across Central and Southeastern Europe may remove certain birth traits, pulling out teeth, cutting off tails, covering the child with a woven shirt, or destroying the caul. Babies born feet first are commonly turned over a stove or open flame to symbolically bake them into the cultural realm. In Romanian tradition, midwives also perform slip-through rituals, where the child is passed 3 times through a wooden hoop or woven shirt as a form of rebirth. The ritual is widely used to cure demonic afflictions or avert werewolf and strigoi transformations, and it has been noted in other Eastern European traditions as well. The same ritual is also used to secure the werewolf's fate rather than avert it. The midwife may ordain the child to be a good werewolf and pass them through the shirt 3 times to mark their rebirth. This is consistent with the metamorphosis of the Pricolici, whose somersault must be repeated 3 times. Likewise, in Western Hungary, the midwife passes the baby through a willow hoop 3 times to secure its fate as a csordás farkas or herd wolf. It is not always necessary to avert the werewolf's destiny, especially if the signs carry positive connotations. Numerous practices focus on carefully preserving the caul or tooth that holds the power of the alter ego. In Hungarian tradition, if the newborn has a tooth, it must remain intact, otherwise the child cannot become a taltos. Meanwhile, preserving the caul is especially important in the magical practices of certain traditions, where it is believed to facilitate both the metamorphosis and the alter ego's battles with demons. In Romanian folklore, the caul buried at the roots of a tree is said to grow into a shirt as the child matures. Once the child comes of age, they dig it up and put it on to claim their demonic power. In other traditions, the caul is dried and used as an amulet, often placed under the shirt, tucked under the arm, tied into a bundle, or sewn into clothing to help the child become a seer or good magician. Children born around wolf times or on dates related to a cycle of 7 are also believed to become good magicians. Sunday-born children are considered lucky across Europe, and in Romanian tradition, they are also destined to become sages, seers, or weather magicians. Meanwhile, those born on Saturday are fated to become Strigoi witches. Children born out of wedlock, who are often excluded from conventional society, are believed to have a supernatural father from whom they are destined to inherit the alter ego. And like some of the other traits mentioned, it can also indicate they are descended from a sacred animal ancestor with whom the alter ego or the animal soul identifies. The same traits that may be considered diabolical at birth can also empower the werewolf to become a good magician with extraordinary abilities for superhuman feats and communication with the spirit world. They can wield otherworldly forces to serve the community. They can protect it by resorting to their demonic nature, and through their hardships and unusual knowledge of both nature and culture, they become revered sages. Embracing the positive destiny revealed or declared at birth is what distinguishes werewolf magicians from cursed werewolves. In Romanian tradition, for instance, a strigoi fated for milk is believed to harm the cattle. However, if the midwife declares a destiny for work, the strigoi will lead a life of tireless labor. Others, just like non-magical children, may be fated for music or other aspects of culture, essentially channeling their demonic power into genius or creative abilities. The dual nature of the wolf means that it can be a demonic creation in the service of the sacred, often as a protector or an instrument of divine punishment. As such, the werewolf magician can become a patron who vanquishes assaulting werewolves, or a wolfsbaner in Germanic languages. Weather magicians, who played a similar role in defending the community against the demonic forces of nature, were prevalent across southeastern Europe until the 20th century, and some of them were called by the local term for werewolf. A notable example of a good werewolf magician is old Thiess of Kaltenbrunn. At his trial in 1691, he testified that his spells and powers were passed down unbeknownst to him after he took a drink from a stranger, an older werewolf, who later taught him to battle witches, restore fertility to the land, and even heal people and animals. Thiess told the court that everything the werewolves do profits people best, for if they didn't exist and the devil made off with the prosperity of grains, robbed or stole it, all the world's prosperity would depart. He claimed that on the eves of Pentecost, St. John's, and Santa Lucia, werewolves were given the power to drag out of hell the grains and animals the sorcerer took there, and they had the sacred mission to retrieve them. Similar stories of werewolves and weather magicians battling witches and strigoi for a good harvest were common across Central and Southeastern Europe. Historian Carlo Ginzburg noted that these beliefs correspond to widespread agrarian traditions from the ancient past. Meanwhile, the transformation into totemic animals, the spirit battles, and the initiation drinks correspond with primitive shamanic practices. The stranger who initiated Thiess is likewise a common motif in werewolf legends. Nearly 80 years before old Thiess, a young French boy named Jean Grenier willingly confessed that he had been a werewolf and therefore he had run across the country by order of the Lord of the Forest, who he described as the big black man who gave him his wolf pelt. The stranger and Lord of the Forest are lingering echoes of the Lord of Animals, the protector of wild creatures and patron of hunters and fishermen in primitive hunting cultures. The Lord can also be a mistress or mother of animals, embodying aspects of the Neolithic Gaia. In Romanian tradition, the mistress of animals is Vulva Lupilor, the spirit guardian of wolves. She conjures them to the winter Sabbath on the night of the wolf, celebrated on the eve of St. Andrew's. She is an old woman with a distaff at her waist who spins constantly and is always followed by a pack of wolves. As for the Lord of Animals, he was conflated with both St. Andrew and St. Peter. The wolf is said to be their dog, preying only where the saints command. When many wolves gather in a place and howl, it is said that they are praying to St. Peter to ordain their next meal. The story goes that Saint Peter and Saint Andrew had a flock of sheep. Upon hearing of the miracles of Christ, they abandoned their flock to become his disciples and left the sheep in the care of dogs. But there was no one to take care of the dogs. Over time, they began to starve and eat the sheep one by one. Seeing this, other shepherds took over the remaining flock and drove the starving dogs into the wilderness. Persecuted and desperate, the dogs began to raid the sheep, killing and devouring as many as they could until the shepherds, with their own dogs, drove them away. This is why St. Peter's dogs became wild and ferocious, eventually turning into wolves. After his death, when St. Peter went to heaven and remembered his dogs, he sent them help to ease their hunger. Every year, on the night of the wolf, on November 30th, St. Andrew calls to them, ordaining their prey, feeding them bread or pretzels, and releasing them to go hunting. The Lord and Mistress of Animals have been conflated with Christian saints in other cultures as well, such as St. George for the Finns, St. Theodore or Tutir for the Ossetians, and the lesser-known St. Radegund or Radiana of Wellenburg, who offered herself to starving wolves that threatened her village. The conflation of Christian saints with the primitive Lord and Mistress of Animals in European folklore was largely influenced by the Church's efforts to suppress traditional beliefs. The Church has long opposed werewolf beliefs, claiming that animal forms or any changed form assumed by someone were demonic illusions, often as a result of diabolical witchcraft. In the 15th century, Molitor wrote in his treatise on witches and diviner women, "The art of changing forms in an illusory manner is called prestige as it obscures vision. Demons, by thus enchanting the eyes, make chimerical forms appear to them, which people believe to be real. For example, someone who looks at a man may see in him a donkey or a wolf, even though he has not taken on any of these forms. It is only the eyes that are deceived by this phantasmagoria, to the point of mistaking their error for reality." This was further emphasized in later catechistic writings that condemned the local traditions and sought to suppress them. A notable example is Mohila's Confessio Orthodoxa of 1640, which circulated widely throughout Eastern Europe. Another example is the Code of Law issued in 1652 by Wallachian Prince Matei Basarab, who criticized the beliefs in Strigoi, stating, "Some madmen gossip and say that many people's bodies, if they die and bury them in the ground, they do not rot, but are found whole, full of blood. And this is the diabolical lure, because the devil imagines himself in every way, and he pretends to be an angel and monk and layman and woman and child and wood and wand and water and blood and coat and dead men and all other things he can become, but it is all a lure." Despite the Church's efforts to eradicate werewolf beliefs, accounts have been recorded close to the present day in Romania. The 19th century geologist and explorer Țaran Gyula was suspected by his neighbors of being a Pricolici. Gyula was born in Arad County and studied law in Budapest and Vienna. However, after barely surviving from severe pneumonia, he was forced to abandon his studies and retreated to the Apuseni Mountains. The villagers there feared him. He was an eccentric man, tall, often dressed in knee-high coats and trousers, with a strange habit of wandering through the forests, caves, and ravines, counting distances in steps and drawing sketches. Some believed he could summon lightning, and many thought he was a Pricolici, even setting their dogs on him. Over time, Gyula befriended the villagers and taught them how to profit from tourism. Whether a Pricolici or not, Gyula had a transformative impact on the community. This is a wholesome example of the integration of an eccentric outcast into the rural community. However, other accounts of Pricolici are much more tragic. In the late 1950s, villagers in the Banat region reported terrifying encounters with what they believed to be Pricolici. In the village of Poieni, a she-wolf killed 3 people and disfigured 2 others, hunting them down one by one over a day. All victims were members of Maria Sârbu's family. The only survivors of the attack were Maria and her sister-in-law, who ultimately slew the wolf in self-defense. Both the women and the villagers believed that the she-wolf was a Pricolici, once a grieving mother who sought to end Maria's bloodline, just as Maria's ancestors had ended hers by killing her only son for a silver dagger. One villager stated that those who harbor transgressions in their souls, like vengeance, are punished to never find rest, neither in this world nor the other, forever cursed to roam as wolves, as strigoi, or as dogs without a master. Before she passed away in the early 2000s, Maria shared with a journalist that she no longer felt human after the attack. The journalist noted that her disfigured appearance was so horrifying that it seemed as though she had absorbed something wild and unnatural from the wolf that had taken so much from her. Meanwhile, in the village of Borlova, during the same period, a sort of sinister bear, a bit larger than a dog, severely injured a group of men while they were setting fish traps by a stream. Rumors quickly spread that one of the men who had wandered off just before the attack was responsible. He was the only one unharmed, and many believed he was cursed, having been born of a third generation out of wedlock. The man also confided in some villagers that when he felt nauseous, he retreated to a secluded place where he covered himself in a bear hide that transformed with him. Months after the attack, the survivors and the suspected Pricolici were gathering wood in the forest. They noticed him wandering off again and prepared for another attack. As expected, a beast emerged from the woods and lunged at them. The man fought back and ultimately slew the animal. They placed its body in a makeshift coffin and brought it back to the village, refusing to let anyone look inside. The attacks stopped and the suspect disappeared, never to be seen again. The locals believed that if a Pricolici was slain in animal form, it would remain that way. They believed that the man was indeed a Pricolici, though no one knew for certain whether the body in the coffin belonged to the man or the beast. Perhaps the most notable account from recent history is that of Grațian Florea, from the village of his book in the Apuseni Mountains. Grațian was the son of a priest, and he spent his life in the village due to his learning difficulties. Yet he seemed to possess peculiar knowledge of things. He lived a life of exclusion as a beggar and stayed in a decaying hut without any facilities on the outskirts of the village. He was always seen carrying a bag on his back and speaking to animals. Once he was even seen arguing with a large screech owl, whom he claimed was his mother. In a 1995 documentary, one villager recounted that one night he and a friend were in the stall with the cows when, out of nowhere, two wolves appeared and pounced on them. They noticed that one of the wolves' rear looked unusual and determined it could only be Grațian. As soon as they called it by the name, both wolves turned and vanished without a trace. Another villager shared that Grațian consistently denied being a Pricolici whenever she questioned him. However, she often noticed him wandering near farms and seemed uncannily familiar with the cattle. She mentioned that while he never entered her barn, he somehow knew her livestock in a way she could not explain. Grațian even assured her that no wolf would ever harm her cows. Yet another villager claimed that Grațian admitted being a Pricolici to him. One day, when it was just the two of them, Grațian asked the young man if he would be interested in switching jobs. The young man quickly declined, explaining that he was young, Grațian was old, and the job was not suited for him. Grațian replied that he could become like him, a wolf. When the young man asked why, Grațian explained that people would fear him, and if anyone refused to give him food, he could simply scare them into doing so. People did seem rather afraid to refuse Grațian, so they gave him food, candles, newspapers, and basic things. The teacher in the village remarked that those who refused him experienced troubles with their animals after a day or two. Sometimes the animals were even eaten by wolves. Villagers believed that Grațian's curse came from his mother. One of them explained that when women give birth, or even when a cow gives birth, there is always a sack. The custom is that the midwife, the one who cuts the umbilical cord, would make a prediction before cutting it. She would say things like, let her be a good singer, or hardworking, or beautiful, or lovable, or wise, or learned. Then she would pull on the cord and break it. When Grațian's mother, the priestess, gave birth to him, the sack did not break. The midwife fated him to be learned, hardworking, or perhaps even a thief, or anything else. But the sack only tore when she fated him to be a Pricolici de lup. It was at that moment that his head came out and he was born. Grațian himself spoke in the documentary, although not about being a Pricolici. Instead, he spoke about his philosophy, peculiar knowledge, his sinister house spirit, and occasionally mentioned his parents. My parents have cursed me, he said. My parents were evil, both of them. The village priest viewed Grațian's presence in the community as a divine instrument for the salvation of others. He believed that his decision to become a beggar was a sign of God's benevolence. Despite having the option to live a more comfortable life with his brother, Grațian chose to live in isolation, like a hermit, and to beg. In doing so, he allowed others the opportunity to show mercy and compassion. Through this, the priest explained, those who offered him help would be rewarded by God when the time came for judgment. Despite his seemingly cursed existence and role as the werewolf of the village, Grațian found purpose. I will be mentioned among the greatest scientists of the world after I would have discovered infinity. In about 10 years, he said. I already have discovered many qualities it would have, and until then I will find out all of its characteristics. And after, I will be able to answer to all the questions somebody would ask me. What is life? What is spirit, soul, everything? I will become equal with God, by essence, not by nature, but morally I shall surpass him. My superiority over God reveals itself in the fact that I am not changeless, as God expresses himself, but I am reversal from evil to good, from the moral regress to the moral progress, from evil to good. That's why I will be superior to God, morally speaking. Then people will say, Grațian is mighty and strong. Then I'll be somebody, maybe in 10 years from now. Grațian's dream was cut short. At the time of the documentary, he was 71 years old. He passed away 6 years later at the seemingly fated age of 77. Romanian werewolf beliefs and accounts have strong archaic influences from ancient wolf cults and transient lycanthropic traditions that are often traced back to the Thracian and Dacian ancestors. The wolf is both a totem of the Dacians and an important marker in the folk calendar. There are several time renewal celebrations dedicated to the wolf in Romanian tradition, notably Ovidenia, which celebrates Philip the Lame, the marked god of wolves, and the Night of the Wolf, which celebrates the Strigoi's winter Sabbath, are observed at the end of November, marking the beginning of winter, the wolves' mating season, and the Dacian New Year. Around this time, the wolf's mystical powers are amplified, and people believe it can see evil spirits and destroy them. Its protective spirit is said to accompany man from birth to death. It appears to newborns named after it to protect them and ward off illnesses. To draw from its strength, newborns in Hunedoara, near the Dacian fortresses of the Orăștie Mountains, were ritualistically fed for the first time through a device in the shape of a circle made from a wolf's jawbone and hide, called a wolf's mouth. Throughout man's life, the wolf spirit appears in healing charms, initiation practices, and observances in the folk calendar. And in death, as the funerary song of the dawn sings, the wolf guides the souls of the dead through the winding paths of the afterlife until they reach the Otherworld, or the land without yearning. This cultural reverence for the wolf and the sacred bond with its spirit was also shared by our ancestors. The Dacians called themselves Daoi, meaning wolves or those akin to wolves, according to Strabo. The name is cognate with the Phrygian Daos for wolf, and both are derived from the Proto-Indo-European root Dao, meaning to press, squeeze, and strangle. Other words derived from this root include the Thracian war god Kandaon, the Apulian wolf god Daunus, or the Illyrian Daunos. Likewise, the city of Daus-Dava in Lower Moesia, between the Danube and Mount Haemus, literally meant village of wolves. Similar names were not unusual among the Indo-Europeans. Certain nomadic Scythians to the east of the Caspian Sea were also called Daoi. Tribes with wolf names have been documented in places as distant as Spain, Ireland, and England, and the phenomenon is not confined to the Indo-Europeans either, as ethnic names derived from animals always held religious significance. Now, there are several theories as to why the Dacians identified with the wolf. According to historian of religions Mircea Eliade, one hypothesis is that their name was derived from a deity or mythical ancestors who assumed the form of a wolf or manifested lycomorphically. While the myth of a supernatural ancestor or lineage progenitor is widely attested in Central Asia, no direct evidence suggests the existence of such a belief among the Dacians. A second hypothesis is that the name could have originated from a group of outcasts, either immigrants from other regions or young men who lived on the fringes of settlements, surviving by plunder. This phenomenon is well documented in ancient times and persisted into the Middle Ages, as evidenced by the laws of Edward the Confessor, which required the proscribed man to wear a wolf-headed mask or wolf-hede. The wolf was the symbol of the fugitive and the exiled in several Indo-European traditions. Many deities who protected outcasts and outlaws had wolf-related names or traits, such as Zeus Lycoreus and Apollo Lycaeus. Romulus and Remus, the sons of the god Mars, who were nursed by the she-wolf of the capital, were also considered fugitives. According to legend, Romulus founded a sanctuary for outcasts and outlaws on the capital, which was protected by the god Lycoris, and Lycoris was identified with Lycoreus of Delphi, himself a wolf god. Finally, a third hypothesis that may explain the name of the Dacians relates to the belief in transformation into wolves through certain rituals, an otherwise widespread phenomenon, particularly well documented in the Balkano-Carpathian region. It could also relate to a ritualistic imitation of the wolf's behavior and appearance. Such ritual imitation was a distinctive feature of military initiations, especially among Meinerbunde, the secret warrior brotherhoods. These rituals and beliefs, related to a martial ideology, may have helped associate fugitives, exiles, and outlaws with wolves. To survive, these outcasts behaved like warrior bands, essentially like true wolves. Illustrating this hypothesis is the Dacian military standard. Draco was a dragon-headed wolf, symbolizing the power, ferocity, and agility of wolves in battle. It was so significant that it even influenced the late Roman military. However, this symbol was not unique to the Dacians. It also appeared in Central Asian, Iranian, and other Indo-European cultures, including Germanic tribes who used wolf or dragon symbolism on their standards. Among the Indo-Europeans, military initiation rituals commonly involved a symbolic transformation into a wild predatory animal. And this was not merely a test of courage or strength, but rather a magical religious experience that radically altered the young warrior's nature. He had to transcend his humanity through a surge of aggressive and terrifying fury that made him resemble a raging carnivore. In Germanic languages, these predator warriors were called berserkir, meaning warriors in bearskin, and wolfhednar, meaning wolfskin men. To become a formidable warrior, the young man had to magically adopt the behavior of the carnivore, especially the wolf. He would ritually don a wolf skin either to share in the essence of the carnivore or to signify his transformation into a wolf and thus his initiation into warriorhood. This transformation was often accompanied by a dramatic change in behavior. As long as he was wrapped in the animal's skin, he ceased to be a man and became the carnivore itself. He was possessed by furor heroicus and no longer felt bound by the laws and customs of man. The existence of these brotherhoods of young warriors and even magicians who behaved like carnivores is behind the dissemination of lycanthropic beliefs that originate from the religious universe of the primitive hunter. The universe of the primitive hunter was dominated by the mystical solidarity between the hunter and the game. This bond, often overseen by lord, mistress, or mother of the animals, explains initiatory rituals and myths about nomadic peoples descending from carnivores. In the mythical scenario, a primordial animal slew man in order to restore them to life, initiated, that is, changed into carnivores. The animal was finally killed, and this event is ritually reenacted during the initiation ceremonies. By putting on the pelt of a wild beast, the man undergoing initiation returns to life not as a human being, but as the primordial animal, the supposed founder of the mystery. In other words, the mythical animal returns to life together with the initiate. The rebirth as the primordial animal is at the root of many beliefs in lycanthropy and werewolves. The warrior, as the ultimate hunter, models his behavior after that of a carnivore. And so, a man becomes aligned with the essence of a carnivore, either by virtue of his descent from a mythical animal, or by ritually donning the pelt of a wild beast to absorb its essence, thus reenacting a primordial event, or by undergoing shamanic or martial initiation. Lycanthropy cases outside this magical religious framework may be explained by the survival of what Eliade refers to as spontaneous initiations, a backward-looking phenomenon of rediscovering outworn or completely transformed ritual scenarios. Furthermore, many legends and beliefs about werewolves stem from a process of folklorization where real rituals, whether shamanic or martial, become projected into the realm of the collective imagination. Part of the Dacian and broader Indo-European heritage, alongside celebrated legends like that of Romulus and Remus, survive in the traditions and mythology of the peoples in the Balkano-Carpathian region. This includes not only beliefs in werewolves, but also outstanding wolf folklore and magic practices, and even the mythical dimension of Dacian history. In Eliade's rather poetic words, it is significant that the only people that succeeded in definitely conquering the Dacians were the Romans, a people whose genealogical myth crystallized around Romulus and Remus, the sons of the god Mars, suckled and raised by the she-wolf of the capital. The result of this conquest and assimilation was the birth of the Romanian people. In the mythical view of history, we could say that the Romanian people was engendered under the sign of the wolf, that is, was predestined to wars, invasions, and emigrations. The wolf appeared for the third time in the mythical horizon of the history of the Daco-Romans and their descendants. For the Romanian principalities were founded as the result of the great invasions by Genghis Khan and his successors. Now, the genealogical myth of the Genghis Khanids proclaims that their ancestor was a grey wolf that came down from the sky and coupled with a doe. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. And why not watch another? Click on the screen or check the description for links to my videos on the Night of the Wolf, the Fates, the Demiurge Devil, and more. In the description, you will also find my references, sources, the documentary on Dacian, and my research on the cases of Maria Sârbu and Old Thiess. And if you would like to see more from me, consider supporting my work on Patreon, linked in the description as well. Until next time, remember, it is the clothes that make the man, but not the wolf.